big bombshell news this week of Bournemouth being absolutely ruthless. And I said my piece on this earlier on the channel, so check that out if you can. But Gary O'Neill's out the door after what many can be described as a really successful season with Bournemouth, not just keeping them in the Premier League, but close to mid-table. It was a really solid season from them, all said and done. But no, Gary O'Neill, despite being made permanent earlier in the season, has now been kicked out, which, again, is absolutely ruthless for a club of Bournemouth's level. Is it ambition? They've just installed almost instantly Iraola from Vallecano as the new manager. But Dave, what's your take on that? Because he's very well known to be a very high-pressing manager. He's the most high-pressing coach in La Liga. So it's clear the kind of direction the Bournemouth board want to go. But at that expense, really, like Gary O'Neill surely earned the right, didn't he, to at least have a pre-season under his belt and get this team going in his way.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, we looked at the period where Bournemouth were struggling a little bit in the league last year, and they decided to obviously keep Gary O'Neill on, and we kind of questioned that decision then, didn't we? But then obviously as the season went on, and he obviously was churning these results out, they were obviously playing playing a lot better than we expected them to, and getting the results. And that's why it seemed so cruel, is that it almost felt as though they were going to give him, a few games and then take him out of the firing line, bring somebody in permanently. They didn't do that. They gave him the opportunity, and they've now taken the opportunity away from him, it just feels so cruel, I feel. If you look at who they've brought in, and Iraola I think it was linked with Leeds last year for a while. Yeah. And I think Leeds tried to get him in. Iraola obviously played under Bielsa as well, so I think there's that sort of romance that he's kind of been taken under his wing. I think there's some similarities, I think, between Vallecano and Bournemouth, though, as well. Obviously came up from the second division. Vallecano have only paid transfer fees for 6 players in 3 years under Iraola. And in those fees averaged just £2 million, which is crazy.
Wow.
And they've beaten Barcelona 3 times in that period. They've beaten Real Madrid. He's obviously got an experience of working with a very limited budget, of which the budget at Bournemouth, you can imagine, especially with the TV revenue, everything coming, it's going to be a lot more expansive than what he's used to working with. There's some similarities, I think, stylistically with Bielsa's teams as well. Obviously, like you mentioned there, the pressing from the front, they tend to attack in transitions very quickly, and obviously try and hurt opponents in a direct nature. And he's been on record saying that he feels as though his sort of teams are better without the ball. Despite this, they were 8th in the league for possession. So you've got to say, with what he's done with that team, it's been almost a miracle, really, with how far he's actually been able to go with them. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and if you're a Bournemouth fan, with obviously what's coming in, and it's obviously something that they've been looking at for a while and planning quite meticulously. So obviously we'll see what happens. It's a completely different league, Premier League, to La Liga. So, and obviously the teams, especially a lot of the teams, are a lot stronger, I'd say, probably than the Liga. There's more teams there that have a lot of talent, a lot more, I'd say, bigger players, a lot stronger teams. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. You can't help but feel sorry for Gary O'Neill with everything he's done.
That's the thing.
That's the main for me.
With Gary O'Neill, though, he earned the right to get the job permanently. But I think the worrying thing has been the last, 5 games of Bournemouth season. They lost every single one of them. So maybe there's the sign of a worrying decline there. I mean, personally, I can kind of see why the players would take their foot off the gas once relegation has been staved off. But maybe that was enough for the board to go, I don't like the direction this is going. And you know what it's like with temporary managers given a permanent job. There's always a decline there. Like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saw it at Manchester United. But I also can see the ambition there from Bournemouth. I can see them going, the style of play isn't incredible, isn't amazing. It's it's quite one-dimensional. But they've learned the lessons maybe from other Premier League teams last season in getting changing early. I mean, this is very early in the summer window, isn't it? So there is chance for Iraola to take the team on the training ground, look where the weaknesses are, and maybe potentially identify transfer targets to make them an even better team next season, Myles, surely.
Yeah, I think so. It's such a weird one to read as a situation because Bournemouth, I think, started to show their intent in January because actually some of the players that they were lining up and being linked with then seemed really ambitious then. I remember them being really heavily linked with Zaniolo, for example, and I think he turned them down in the end. And you wonder if this is their attempt to try and kick on that next level, even in the market, by being able to attract more players than maybe Gary O'Neill would be. No distaste towards him or anything, and he deserves an immense amount of credit. But I wonder what his pull is like in the transfer market, full stop. It's difficult to judge. Iraola's only been a manager for 5 years. He's only 40, so really you're investing in potential here, which... Could you argue that Gary O'Neill had a bit of potential? It seems like, I wonder if it's a record for the quickest ever sacking of a manager who was nominated for manager of the season. It seems bizarre timing in some ways. But I suppose when you've got newish owners in charge of a club who are looking to invest massively in improving the infrastructure of the club, a big appointment can do that. And they'll be watching the teams around them invest money in their kind of setups and improve their managerial candidates. We've talked openly on this podcast about how some teams that looked like they were struggling with relegation on mid-table went out and got world-class managers last season in the likes of Wolves, even Villa in some ways. I wonder if this is Bournemouth just trying to do their bit to keep up. And if that's the case, I suppose you can't argue with it. I'm really interested to see what the reaction from Bournemouth fans is long-term, because Gary O'Neill, he will have had a great deal of favour with them anyway. And although that it wasn't always perfect, there were some remarkable results in there. And who had Bournemouth down as staying up at the start of the season?
Yeah,
I think he's done we've talked openly about it already on the podcast. He did a phenomenal job. Here we are. This is football.
One thing for sure, he's not going to be short of suitors, is he? After that,
I don't think so.
Gary O'Neill.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know what his level is. You say that, but I actually think he might be. Does he have to drop to the Championship now?
Yeah, I think he was expecting that anyway. I really do. I think he was surprised to get the Bournemouth job permanently because, I mean, if you said it in interviews, I expected to have to drop down and earn my stripes, basically. I don't doubt he'll do that as well, and I don't think he'll bother too much about having to do that. But it's such a shock to the system to have signed a permanent contract a matter of months ago to then be in this position. And it does remind me slightly of, I keep recalling this Southampton side that got promoted and worked through the leagues. They had, I think, Nigel Adkins in charge, who took them as far as he could, replaced him ruthlessly with Mauricio Pochettino, who everybody turned their noses up after at the time. He was Espanyol coach, wasn't he? And look what happened there. So there are some similarities there in the gamble that they've taken. And maybe it's a sign of huge ambition from Bournemouth.